Believe it or not, behind this petrol station just outside of Aylesford in Kent is the final resting place of Horsa, the semi-mythical leader of the Anglo-Saxons, who along with his brother Hengist came to Britain and laid the foundations for what later became England. They came to Britain in the early medieval period after the Romans left, a period that was once called the Dark Ages, the same time mythical figures such as King Arthur and Merlin were said to have lived. Hengist and Horsa tread the line between myth and history, and still to this day, historians are divided on whether or not they actually existed. And perhaps that's why they've slipped out of our collective imaginations, and perhaps because unlike King Arthur, they weren't venerated in medieval Christian culture since they were pagan. Either way, their names have been slowly forgotten. But it's a brilliant story, and it's one we should all know, so let's get into it. Britain was cast into darkness after the Romans left in 410 AD. Urban life collapsed. The Britons had grown dependent on the empire, the legions had kept peace, and the Britons had forgotten how to fight. But north of Hadrian's Wall, outside the reach of Roman rule, there were tribes who had never stopped fighting. In particular, the Picts, who had been fighting other Scottish and Irish tribes, who now turned their attention to the south. Hadrian's Wall was barely manned. They raided with impunity. The Britons were sitting ducks. Vortigern, the king of the Britons, needed mercenaries to help fight the Picts, so he hired the barbarian brothers Hengist and Horsa, who were the leaders of the Jutes, to fight his battles for him. The Jutes were a kindred tribe of the Angles and the Saxons, who originate from what's now called Denmark. Hengist and Horsa sailed over from mainland Europe and were given a parcel of land in Kent to set up a base, and they were promised more land once they'd defeated the Picts. They fought the Picts up and down the east coast of Britain, never once losing a battle. After each victory, Hengist and Horsa would say to Vortigern that they needed more men. They would send word home, and more Jutes, followed by Angles and Saxons, came to their aid. After the Picts were defeated for good, Hengist and Horsa's army had grown to a much larger force than the one they had when they arrived. Vortigern threw them a feast. Hengist got his beautiful daughter Rowena to wait hand and foot on the king, who became besotted with her. After the feast, Hengist and Horsa returned to their base in Kent, expecting soon to be rewarded with the land that Vortigern had promised them, but Vortigern refused to hand it over. They decided to take the land by force. They marched through Kent, laying waste to the land. The Britons gathered their forces and met them in battle here at Ashford. Vortigern and his son Vortigern led the Britons. The two forces clashed here violently and with huge casualties on both sides. Horsa was slain by Vortigern. The Jutes tried to avenge him and attacked Vortigern's retinue, but Vortigern defended him bravely, and he too was slain while protecting his father. But he gave Vortigern enough time to retreat, and the Britons fled. According to local folklore, this tomb called sCoty was built for Vortigern, and this stone a mile or so away was erected as Horsa's tombstone. His banner, a white horse, was draped over it, giving it the name the White Horse Stone. After the battle, Hengist then sued for peace with Vortigern, fearing that the Britons could rally more troops. He played his ace card and offered Vortigern his daughter Rowena's hand in marriage. Vortigern is still under her spell and accepts. The two sides agree to peace and come together for a wedding and a great feast. The Britons get drunk and enjoy the festivities. Vortigern is content with his new bride, but the Jutes have lulled them into a false sense of security. And beneath their cloaks, they have concealed daggers. When the time is right, they pull them out in unison and unleash hell on the Britons, leaving no survivors. With Vortigern now out of the picture, Hengist goes on to capture the rest of Kent, securing the first Anglo-Saxon kingdom in Britain. The Angles and the Saxons that come with him go about conquering the neighbouring kingdoms, and later, these tribes merge to create England. Now for the big question. Did any of this actually happen? And why did I call Hengist and Horsa semi-mythical? We know from archaeological records that the Anglo-Saxons started settling en masse in Britain at around this time, but there are limited written sources. The pagan Anglo-Saxons had no literature, and so we have no contemporary accounts for them. We only have one source that was written at the time that the events took place, a Welsh monk called Gildas. He writes about the invasion, he mentions Vortigern, but he never mentions Hengist and Horsa, or any other Anglo-Saxon by name. We first hear of Hengist and Horsa from the Anglo-Saxon monk Bede 300 years later. I'm undecided on this, but you can make up your own mind here. But there are two schools of thought. Were Hengist and Horsa real people kept alive in an oral tradition for 300 years? Or did Bede, needing to put a name and a face to the Anglo-Saxon creation story, invent them? They do seem to fit the European mythical archetype of founding brothers, such as Romulus and Remus, who were said to have founded Rome. A story Bede, as a monk who read Latin, would have been very aware of. After all, Rome was the centre of the Christian world, and any Christian kingdom wanted to replicate it. The White Horse Stone, Horsa's alleged final resting place, is in fact part of a much older Stone Age monument, which is thousands of years older than the time of the Anglo-Saxons. The story around the stone began during the Middle Ages. Standing stones like this were mistakenly attributed to great kings, when in fact they were the work of Stone Age farmers. There's no evidence of Horsa ever using a white horse as his emblem. The symbol doesn't appear until the 12th century, when Saxon royalty first used it on their coat of arms. The battle may not have even taken place here. Bede says that the battle took place at Ashford, and we've taken that to mean Aylesford, but the reality is we can't be sure if it's the same place. sCoty is a much older Neolithic building. In fact, it might be the earliest stone structure in England. The truth is too hard to decipher. I think the story is worth remembering though, and there would have been a time when everyone knew of Hengist and Horsa, but that's not the case anymore. There are hundreds of standing stones like this in England, but this one has had an epic tale bestowed upon it, and it's keeping the story alive for anyone who wants to look for it.